So if you just take a note of the measurements in front of you, find your bust measurement, which is the 108, 112, 116 and 120, and that is centimetres. And when you found your bust measurement, the numbers that I'm circling now, they will be your neck measurement on your back bodice. So on the back neck, it is the A to F measurement, and on the front neck, it is the A to G measurement. For instance, this bodice block bust is 120, so my back neck measurement will be 9 centimetres. So the first area that we're working on is the back neckline. The reason for the shaping of the armhole like this is because the bust measurement is bigger. So what we need to do is we need to adjust the standard sizing on the pattern to allow for the bigger bust measurement. So we're going to start off with the A to F measurement. So you're going to measure from A across to F, your neck width, which is what we've just been looking at, the numbers we've just been looking at. And then you're going to measure up from F to F1, 2 centimetres. So what I've done, as this is an adjustment to the original block, you can either rub out all the information on the area that you're working at, or you can go over with a coloured pencil or a fine liner. So once you've measured from F to F1, which is 2 centimetres, you'll draw in from F1 to G, your new shoulder, and as we just saw there, you'll want to put in your curve on your neckline also. So this is a voiceover for the video, as the sound on the original video didn't work, so bear with me. So the next section that we're working on is along the bust line, the C1 measurement, which is your back width. And then from the C1 measurement, we're going to measure across the bust line 7 centimetres. So from the CI, you're going to measure across 7 centimetres. And that's going to be your new eye point. So I'm just scribbling off the original and marking the new one. So you can use a rubber, because I was using a pen, just so you can see clearly the areas that we're working on. So because we've changed our underarm point, we need to then change the side seam and the side seam shaping. So you're going to measure from the end point on the hip, which will stay the same, and you'll draw a line from the end point straight up to the eye, like we did in the original block, and then we will come back down to the B1 line and reshape the back. So we're working on the waistline, well, the B1 line, B to B1 line for the waist shaping, and from the line that we've drawn along the B1 line, we're going to measure in 2 centimeters and put a mark, and then we're going to get a curve and add in the curve from the eye to the waist shaping point. And then from the waist back down, tapering into the side seam. I've pressed on quite hard with the red pencil, and that was only so that you can see it on the camera. So you want a nice fine pointer on your pencil. So that's the back adjusted to what we need. So that means we're going to move over to the front. So we've got a couple of measurements to show first. So we'll turn them around the right way. So this time we're not looking at the shoulder measurement, we're looking at the dart allowance. So your bust measurement is the 108, 112, 116, 120. So find your measurement, and whatever your measurement syncs up to, that will be your dart allowance. So I'm using 120 centimetre bust, so my dart allowance will be 11 centimetres. There's lots of writing on this block, and that's simply because I didn't want to forget anything to tell you. It's a shame that you couldn't hear the original video. So the first areas that we're working on is the A to G measurement. So the neck measurement, the A to G, is the same as the back neck measurement. So the number that you was using for your back neck, it will be the same. So I was using 9 centimeters. So I'm going to measure from A across the top line 9 centimeters and put a mark. So that will be my new shoulder point. So that will now become G. And the original G will be rubbed out or crossed off. So we're going to go down the centre front A to F, and a standard measurement for a bigger bust is 8.5 centimetres. So we're going to go from A and measure down 8.5 centimetres. Put a mark. And that'll be the new F point. And that's the base of the neck. So what we're going to do now is we're going to measure and draw a box. So from G down and from F across until they meet to form a rectangle. And then when we have drawn the rectangle, we're going to bisect the angle again and draw in the new neckline. So if you bisect your angle at 45 degrees, it should give you a good pointer to work to. So G now is my new shoulder point. And we're going to work, G is the new neck point. And then we're going to work along the shoulder line now. So this is a technique different to what we used on the original block. And it's to get the alignment of the shoulder. So from your new G point, you're going to measure across the top line of the bodice. I've drawn it on, but you don't have to draw it on. I'm just drawing it so that you can see. So we're measuring across from G 12 centimetres. Then when we get to that point, the 12 centimetre point, we're going to measure downwards into the block 5.5 centimetres. And these measurements are the same for everybody. 5.5 centimetres, sorry. And what's going to happen now is that marker is going to be the marker for the shoulder. So we're going to make a triangle between that marker and the G. So what I'm working out now is the dart allowance plus the shoulder measurement, which gives me 25 centimetres. So I know now that my line I'm going to draw, my shoulder line, is going to be 25 centimetres. So I'm going from my new neck point, so the G. If I do the roller the other way, you can see. So I'm sitting from my G and my ruler is just moving up until it hits that 5.5 line that we've just marked in. And that'll give us a really nice shoulder slant. So I'm going to draw my line at 25 centimetres. Already you can see how that has made a difference. Okay, so now we're going to mark in the dart line. So the dart line's not changed. The dart line is quarter of the chest measurement, sorry. So if you I'm just drawing over the original one that's on there so that you can see, but on yours, it should be there already. So then what we're going to do is we're going to now mark in the dart. So where the dart line and the shoulder line intersect, we're going to measure along the shoulder line from the dart line 2 centimeters and put a mark. And that mark is going to be the L mark, which is the leg of the dart. I'm just going to label that up so you can see. Now your K point should still be in the same place, which is 2 centimeters below the bust line on the dart line. So your K should still be in the same place. So now what we're going to do is we're going to mark in the dart allowance from L So we're going to measure from L the dart allowance that's synced up with your bust measurement. So the one I'm using is 11 centimeters. So I'm going to put a mark and then label it up M, so that's the M point. And then we're going to go ahead and draw the dart again in case it's adjusted in any way. We're going to measure along the chest line. So we want the dart allowance at the chest line, which needs adding on from J to J1. So it might be the same as what it was. It might need adjusting the J to J1 marker. This one has stayed the same. So I've just put a little mark so that you can see that this one stayed the same. And then I'm going to drop a line down to the bust line, which will be a good anchor point for the armhole curve. So I'm going to take from J1 a straight line up to the edge of the shoulder. So the edge of the shoulder should be the H. I'm going to mark it on later. So what you're going to do is, now you've drawn that line from the shoulder point to the J1 point, you're going to measure and find the middle point of the line now. And then when you've found the middle point, you're going to measure 1 centimetre in towards the bodice, front, and then you're going to draw a curve from J1 up to the point you've just marked in, and then up to the shoulder point. That should give you a nice curve. So the next part that we're going to do is we are going to close the dart to draw in the apex. So we're going to fold from the L to the M, making sure that the excess is folded towards the centre front. So I'm just putting a pin in to hold it in place. What I'm going to do, I'm going to draw from the neck point a straight line to the shoulder point. So there's a H marked in there, which is the shoulder point. So that's the new shoulder line drawn in. And then I'm going to get a pin and I'm just going to pin prick through all the layers to get a marker of the base of the dart. Some darts, when they're closed, the excess runs on the inside of the neckline. Well, most darts do, but because this is a large dart, what we're going to do is we're going to cut the excess dart away and make it slightly different. This part will come in a second. So we're still going to do the same process as what we did before. So we will mark on the base of the dart. If you've got a dart, so when you fold it over, the excess doesn't go into the neckline, then you, at this point, have almost finished. If it does go into the neckline, then you've got one or two different steps to do. So what we're going to do now is we're going to finish marking off that underarm point. To work that out, we take the top line measurement of the bodice from the front to the back, which is 66 in this case, and then we work out what the C to I measurement is on the front, and on this one it is 28.5. So I'm going to take 28.5 away from 66, which will leave me with 38.9, which takes me all the way from the front up to that same marker point. Some people's touch, some people's won't. Everybody's different, and that's okay. So now we're just bisecting the angle at the J1 point where it touches the bust, and on the front bodice the underarm point can sit lower than the bust line to give a nice curve. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to fill in the rest of the armhole, ready to take a measurement to see if it syncs up with the top arm measurement. So if you've got a bendy ruler, or you can use tape measure on a side, you're going to measure the back armhole through to the front armhole. If it's separated, do it in 2 pieces and then add it together. So if it's separated, measure the back armhole and then the front armhole and add it together. So I'm just writing that measurement down, which is 52.5. And now what I'm going to look for is my top arm measurement. And we're looking for the top arm measurement to be 12 to 15 centimetres around difference, which will give us a good indicator if the armhole is the right size. So it comes up as 14.5, which is just in that border of it being enough with ease. So I know my armhole is looking like it's a better shape and the measurement syncs up with the top arm. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back down to the B1 line and just shape the front waist. So we're working on the B1 line again, but this time we're measuring from the straight line into the bodice block 1.5 centimetres. If your bodice block front and back are separate, so if the line is separate from the end to the eye on the front and the end to the eye on the back, then draw yourself in a new line for the front and then shape the waist accordingly. So there you've got the back bodice altered and the front bodice altered. So what I'm going to show you now is how to trace off a working pattern just on the front So you can see how to use that dart by adding a seam allowance rather than the fullness of the dart. So I've got my paper over the top, giving it a quick rub to flatten it out with the pattern master so I can see. And I'm just going to start tracing off the front, the centre front seam, the centre front line even, all the way around the shoulder, the neck. I've just run out a little bit of paper there, but it's really only just to show you how the dart will look. So I would suggest you just watch this section because I made a little mistake here with the dart by just drawing the straight shoulder line, which I'll rectify in a minute at the end. So I'll show you how to do it. So don't follow me for this section. You can trace off everything at the end. Just watch. So obviously on your working pattern you have all your body lines on there, your dart line and your darts, and then you will cut around. Forgot that the camera was in the middle. I think I'll move the paper in a second so you can actually see. So all patterns handmade are cut net, which means there's no seam allowance added on at this stage on a working pattern. So this piece has absolutely no seam allowance on whatsoever. So the difference with this is that we cut away the dart, because rather than have all the fullness of the dart, we're just going to have a seam allowance, and we're going to stitch it together with less bulk. So there you can see that's what your working pattern will look like. And then to trace off, so I'm just going to show you how to mark it up on some fabric, and I'm actually going to stitch together just to show you how it works. So this is really just an example of how the dart works. It's not something to copy for tracing off your toile and making up your pattern, because I'm cutting corners just to show you the dart. I don't want you to cut corners. So what you would do, you would mark in your seam allowance around your pattern, so on your shoulders, neckline, on your front, and this time you would also add seam allowance on your dart. So we're working with, on the toile, a 2.5 centimetre seam allowance. So, and the seam allowance, obviously because it's a point, will go all the way down until it touches, so until it meets each other. So if we're marking those shoulders, so there you can see how the dart has got a seam allowance around it. Now I'm going to cut out using paper scissors, so they're a little bit blunt. So I'm just going to cut down and around my seam allowance, including down that dart line, that dart. And all we're doing is we've taken out that fullness so it doesn't come across into the neckline. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw around the dart like I would draw around the edge of my pattern, so I know where my stitch line is. And mark on all my body lines, etc, etc. And so now I'm going to take off the pattern, and the first thing that you would do is you would sew all your darts together. So you would only cut away on this dart because it's a large dart. A smaller dart you don't need to. So as you can see, the raw edges of the fabric come together. So what we're going to do first is we're going to find the apex of the dart. Put in a pin so we know where to stop. And then the raw edges should sit nicely together now, ready to sew. And this is when I realised that I had made a little mistake with not tracing the shoulder off properly, but I will come to that part in a minute. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to whiz and stitch the dart in place and then come back and show you. So where I'm marking the line now, that is my stitch line. So you can see the point near the apex of the dart, and that's the bit that's folded over, and that can be cut up at the end. So don't forget as well, if you need any help whatsoever, if yours is just not working out, just give me an email and I'll do my best to help you, whether that be show you a video or make a video for you, give you some instructions, advice, etc. Don't hesitate to ask. So here's the dart again, so we've sewn it up this time, and when we open it out it just looks like a dart like anybody else's, and the excess of the dart is a lot smaller. So that's the excess as a dart, and that's what I was saying about earlier, is where that folds in, you can trim that down if you've got sharp enough scissors, My paper scissors won't cut it. And then you would press your seam towards your centre front. So if you can see that bit there at the top, the shoulders are not actually matching up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the block back and show you the mistake that I made. So hopefully you won't do it. And if you do, you'll know how to resolve it. So we're going to go back to the L to K line and bring it across to M. So closing that shoulder dart up. And I'm going to put a pin in to keep it together. There we go. And then I'm going to get some scissors. And it's really the best way, the cut and slash method, the best way to get that shoulder shaping in. So I've cut across the folds of the fabric. I'm unpinning, and you can see now I've got that nice shape. And you can see from where the M on the original shoulder line is, and then the new shoulder line above it. I'm going to cut that away all the way to the end. So this is, yeah, you're actually cutting on your master block to get that shape. So you can see there from what I'd traced off that on from the shoulder point up to the dart allowance, I'd missed quite a big section, which then, if you look at the toile, you can actually see the difference that it's made. So by missing out that section, the shoulder is not aligned properly. So if you make sure you do that last step by cutting, and then what you can do is you can either keep it like that because you don't necessarily cut your bodice block, or you can put a bit of paper behind it and stick it down. So when you trace off your working pattern now, you trace it off in exactly the same way from your H line up, right up to the top. Cut your dart out again, but take your dart lines all the way from the original shoulder line to the new shoulder line so that you get a nice straight line on your bodice toile. So there you go.